Hello, you join us again from the west coast of Kintyre. Occasional bout of traffic thundering past on the A83. We've been having tremendous fun since we last met because we've got a static caravan for my stepdaughter Lauren to live in, and we've been doing it up. Now, static caravans on a windy Scottish coast, you generally put them on blocks and timber to get them level, and then you chain them down. So you've got shackles and chains. Now, we sing "Our shackles are gone, our spirit is free," and "My chains fell off, my heart was free." But that's the one that's been understanding I've been understanding that that's the one thing we don't want with this static caravan. So there's a slight difference to our normal mode there, but we press on. Today's gospel reading is John chapter 18 verses 1 to 11. John chapter 18 verses 1 to 11. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples over the brook Kidron, where there was a garden which he and his disciples entered. And Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, "Whom are you seeking?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now when he said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Then he asked them again, "Who are you seeking?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way, that the saying might be fulfilled which he spoke, 'Of those whom you gave me, I have lost none.'" Then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Jesus said to Peter, "Put your sword into the sheath. Shall I not drink the cup which my Father has given me?" Amen. Thanks be to God for this reading from his holy gospel. To his name be the praise and the glory. So, this is John's story of the betrayal and arrest in Gethsemane. Basically, this is, if they were doing little subtitles, as they're sometimes put between the paragraphs, it would be "You're it." So, John, he's written his Bible, his Gospel, in about AD 90 something, and so it's basically 60 years after the events that they're here. So he's remembering there's important stuff, and John is not a bloke who is about to waste words. So when he says they went over the Kidron Brook, it's important. It's not just a piece of local colour or descriptive. My stepdaughter, for who the static caravan is for, is an author, and when she writes her books, she puts extra words in to describe stuff so that people will understand, and extra words to describe just to set the scene. But John isn't scene setting. Is saying important things. Now, the Kidron Brook was the outfall from the temple. It's where the temple drained in, the temple courts drained out down the hill into the Kidron Brook. Now, the lambs that were being slaughtered for the Passover up at the Temple Mount, their blood would have gone into the gutters and would have gone down the gullies and would be going down the Kidron Brook. Now, the Kidron Brook will be red with blood. The other side of the loch from the peninsula here is, and just inland from there, there's a place called Glendaruel, and up on the just about on the Carls of Bute, and it's Glendaruel is where it is named there because the river ran red because of one of the intertribal massacres of the Scottish clans. So up here we understand stuff about the rivers being red with blood. And 30 years after the death of Jesus, they counted the number of lambs that were slaughtered in the temple, and it was just over 250,000. It's 256,000 lambs slaughtered, sacrificed to appease sin and to try to get God's favour. And that's a lot of lambs, and that's a lot of blood. And Jesus, who was going to be the lamb, as foretold by Abraham when he turned to his lad and said, God will provide of himself the lamb for the sacrifice, is either stepping over on a low bridge or on stepping stones, or he's fording through the streams. He's either walking just over this blood, or he's walking through it. And he is the lamb. And that is not lost on John. So he puts it in there. Now, Gethsemane means oil press, and it's olive groves, and it was where they grew olives, and there were private gardens. You couldn't have gardens in the city. There wasn't enough room. There were rules about whether you could use manure as a fertiliser in the city and stuff like that. So you didn't. If you're rich, you had a piece of land outside the city, and that was your garden. So this was a garden, a private garden. You probably got a key to it. Been offered it by somebody who was a supporter, maybe Joseph of Arimathea, maybe not. We don't know. Anyway, Judas received a detachment of troops, verse 3, and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees. So we can already tell it's a big number. But then we get into the Greek, and the Greek word is spira, and that's a Roman cohort. Now, the cohorts in Roman terms was 600 men, plus temple police and plus officers from the Sanhedrin. Now, that's a massive number of officers. Even if you drill it down and go a detachment from a centurion's thing, and they'd only sent 10 Roman soldiers. They're sent. That's possibly the lowest number. It can mean anything between 10 and 600, depending on the precise word that was used and what it's a detachment from, if you like. Is it a detachment from an infantry division, or is it a detachment from a centurion's collection of soldiers? So that's a lot of soldiers for one carpenter and 11 like ordinary blokes and fishermen. So this force of worldly authority, the world authority effectively, the temple, the Sanhedrin and the Romans, they rock in, and they've got all the latest night fighting equipment. They've got lanterns, torches and weapons. So it's a bit like sending the SAS in to sort some bloke out. And Jesus, he said, he walks forward. He doesn't hide at this point. There's no attempt to get away, and he walks forward and he said, "Who are you seeking?" And they answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said, "I am he." Now, this is the last, in verses 5, 6 and 8, this is the last time John uses his I am statements. And it's ego eimi, I am. And this is a harking straight back to Exodus 3:14, when Moses asked God who what he should call him, who he is, and he says, "I am who I am." Now, the I am statements, Jesus says, "I am the bread of life," John 6:35. "I am the light of the world," John 8:12. "I am the door of the sheep," John 10:7. "I am the good shepherd," John 10:11. And of course the one we all remember, "I am the resurrection and the life," John 11:25. And it says, I am the way, the truth and the life," John 14:6. And "I am the true vine," John 15:1. So these are the I am statements. This is Jesus reinforcing it. Now we pass over this a bit. Passover is also a good biblical word, but we pass over it a bit because it's Jesus. Yes, okay, we understand that, we know who you are, but it's reinforcing it to the Jews who are present. It's reinforcing it to the Jews because they see the I am statements. Only God says that. So that's blasphemy straight away if they don't believe he's God. He's either is God or is blaspheming to a suicidal extent. So we can tell it's reinforcing that he is who he is, and and it says when he reveals who he is I am he. And it says they drew back and fell to the ground. This is the power of God. This is Jesus finishing his earthly ministry and basically going, I'm going into full God mode. I am releasing and revealing who I am. And then he asked them again, who are you seeking? They said, Jesus of Nazareth. He said, I've told you I am he, therefore if you seek me, let these men go their way. Because he's not hiding, he's not trying to get out of this in any way. He knows his Father's will and he's going to do it. And he doesn't want any of these other people to get hurt. And he's showing his superior power. And he, despite the fact that the world powers have rocked in to this garden, the world powers have rocked into this garden to take him down, and yet it's recorded here that only Jesus gives orders. Jesus says, let these men go, and he turns to Peter, put your sword in its sheath. He's the only one giving orders in this situation. He, despite the power of the world being displayed, he is in calm. He's calm and he is in complete control. In John's version, it's different to the others, Matthew, Mark and Luke. They've got the prayers in the garden with Jesus going off, and they've got him basically praying quietly by himself and telling the other people to pray, and then them falling asleep. Now, I can understand from the human aspect that probably happened, if you like, that we probably told them to pray, he was going to pray, and would they pray for him, and then they fell asleep. I can just imagine. I'm so grateful that it's Jesus Christ that's Lord and not Alan Sugar, because you could just imagine Jesus coming back from praying and going, look, you only had one job, I gave you one task and you mucked it up, you're fired. You can just imagine that. But Jesus, in John's version, Jesus is in complete charge, and he's sorting it all out, and he's showing his superior power. He's showing that he's in charge. He's giving the orders, and he's displaying his power, and his power is there for everyone to see, because when he reveals his name, he reveals that he is the I am. They fall down. Jesus has, at all times, has the power and authority not to go through with his arrest, trial, beating and crucifixion. But he chooses to go through it. And thank God he does, because he chose to die for us, and he did so whilst in complete control of the situation. Now, I have to say that when push comes to shove, and it does in the Christian life, it does come to shove, I'm quite likely to react like Peter and just go off on one when it gets testy. But Jesus is not asking for that. He's asking for the calm. He's asking for acceptance, but he's asking for people, for us to recognise his power, recognise his authority, and to show that to the world. Amen.